The old wooden house stood at the edge of town, surrounded by white fields that turned golden every summer. Its walls carried the weight of decades, yet the home was alive with warmth, laughter, and the faint scent of fresh bread. Inside lived grandfather Edward, his daughter-in-law Maria, and her 12-year-old son Daniel, a boy with curious eyes and a restless spirit. Edward was a man carved by life's storms. His back was slightly bent, his face lined like a map of time, but his voice carried strength and clarity. Neighbors respected him not only for his age but for the wisdom that seemed to flow naturally from him. He believed deeply in karma, though he preferred to explain it in simple words. Life, he would often say, is like the soil under our feet. If you plant thorns, you cannot expect roses. But if you plant kindness, you will one day harvest peace. Daniel listened to these words while sitting by the fire, only half understanding their meaning but sensing something powerful behind them. Unlike some of the other boys in town who laughed at old man stories, Daniel felt they carried secrets about life that no schoolbook could reveal. One autumn evening, as the sky turned crimson, a weary traveler knocked on their door. His clothes were torn, his face pale from exhaustion. Without hesitation, Maria welcomed him in and served him a plate of rice and bread. Daniel frowned. Food was scarce in their home, and giving it away meant less for them. Sensing his grandson's unease, Edward leaned closer and whispered, "Daniel, respect is not only for our elders but for every soul that struggles. When you give today, the world remembers, and one day, it will give back." The traveler ate, blessed them, and left with tears in his eyes. Daniel said nothing, but that night, before sleep, he wondered, what if kindness truly came back like a circle? The years passed, and Daniel grew quickly. By 16, he was taller than his mother, with a sharp mind and restless energy. He dreamed of a life beyond the small town, one filled with adventure, success, and freedom. His best friend, Michael, shared the same hunger for something greater. The two boys often sat on the fence near the fields, watching cars pass on the distant highway. "Someday," Michael said, kicking a stone across the dirt road, "I'm going to leave this place and never come back. I'll have money, a big apartment in the city, and people will finally know my name." Daniel laughed. "I'll be right there with you. We'll prove we're more than just small-town kids." But grandfather Edward's voice often echoed in Daniel's memory, "Life gives back what you put into it." Daniel wanted to believe it, yet part of him doubted. The world seemed unfair. People with power and money often lived selfishly, while good, hard-working people like his mother struggled to make ends meet. At school, Daniel met Emily, a bright girl with a quiet smile. She admired his ambition and often encouraged him to follow his dreams. For the first time, Daniel felt the stirrings of something deeper than friendship. But with dreams came distance. Daniel's growing hunger for success made him impatient with the simple life at home. He began arguing more with his mother. "Daniel," Maria said one evening, her hands red from washing laundry, "your grandfather is right. Respect and patience will carry you further than pride." "You don't understand." Daniel snapped. "Dreams don't come true by sitting here, listening to old sayings. I need more, I deserve more." Edward listened quietly from his chair, his eyes sad but steady. He had once been young too, once carried his own restless fire. He knew that life would have its own way of teaching Daniel the lessons he refused to hear now. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His heart was torn between love for his family and the growing pull of a larger world. He didn't yet realize that chasing dreams without balance could come at a heavy cost. By the time Daniel turned 19, life began to move faster than he ever imagined. He enrolled in college in the city, leaving behind the quiet town, the golden fields, and the wooden house where his childhood had taken root. Maria wept quietly the day he left, while Edward simply placed a firm hand on his grandson's shoulder and whispered, "Remember, Daniel, what you give to others will return to you. Never forget that." At first, the city felt like a dream. Bright lights, crowded streets, and endless opportunities surrounded him. Daniel threw himself into his studies but soon found himself distracted by the thrill of independence. Emily, who had also moved to the city for her studies, became his anchor. They spent long evenings walking by the river, dreaming together about the future. "You'll be successful," Emily would say softly, "but promise me you'll never let success change who you are." Daniel smiled, but deep inside, ambition whispered louder than her words. Then came Sophie, a confident, charming classmate who seemed to embody everything Daniel thought he wanted: style, confidence, and connections. She noticed him during a debate competition, and from that moment, Daniel felt pulled into her world. Sophie introduced him to new friends, lavish parties, and a lifestyle that seemed to promise the future he craved. Emily noticed the change. She saw how Daniel's eyes sparkled when Sophie entered her room, how his phone buzzed with late-night messages he didn't share. One evening, Emily confronted him. "Daniel, are you seeing her?" Silence hung heavy between them. Daniel wanted to deny it, but the truth had already written itself across his face. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I believed in you," she whispered. "I thought you were different." Her footsteps echoed as she walked away, leaving Daniel with a hollow ache he tried to drown in the noise of the city. Sophie was exciting, yes, but her world was shallow, built on appearances and fleeting pleasures. Still, Daniel clung to it, believing it was the price of success. Back home, Maria sensed the shift in her son through his rare phone calls. She heard the impatience in his tone, the lack of warmth in his words. Edward, however, simply shook his head when Maria worried. "Life has a way of teaching lessons we cannot teach," he said quietly. Daniel didn't yet understand, but the seeds of betrayal, his own betrayal, were already planting the thorns that would soon pierce his life. The glitter of the city lost its shine faster than Daniel expected. What once felt like freedom soon turned into noise, obligations, and pressure. Sophie's world demanded more money, more parties, more appearances. Daniel tried to keep up, but every step deeper into that lifestyle pushed him further away from the people who truly mattered. Michael, his childhood friend, called him one evening. "Dan, you barely pick up anymore. What's happening with you?" "I'm busy, Mike," Daniel replied curtly. "I don't have time to sit around talking about the past." "But we promised," Michael's voice cracked. "We promised we'd do this together. Don't tell me you're forgetting everything we dreamed about." Daniel sighed. Dreams change. And with that, he ended the call, not realizing he had just cut one more thread of loyalty. Meanwhile, Maria grew increasingly worried. She wrote letters that Daniel seldom answered. When he did, his words were short, often impatient. She missed the boy who once sat by the fire listening to Edward's wisdom. Grandfather Edward watched silently. He had seen enough of life to recognize the pattern: pride was pulling Daniel away, and soon karma would do its work. The breaking point came during winter break when Daniel returned home for a short visit. The wooden house felt smaller, older, less impressive compared to the city life he was chasing. He barely spoke at dinner, scrolling on his phone instead of listening to his family. Finally, Maria broke the silence. "Daniel, is this really who you've become? Cold, distant, ungrateful? Your grandfather and I sacrificed everything for you, and now you treat us like strangers." Daniel's frustration boiled over. "I didn't ask you to sacrifice anything. Maybe I don't want to live stuck here like you do. I'm building something better, something bigger." The room froze. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Edward didn't raise his voice, but his words cut deep. "Daniel," he said firmly, "success built on disrespect will crumble faster than you imagine. You think you are rising, but you are digging your own fall." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't need lectures. I know what I'm doing." He stormed out into the cold night, slamming the door behind him. Inside, Maria cried silently, and Edward closed his eyes with the sorrow of a man who understood that sometimes love must let go until life itself teaches the lesson. Far away, under the city lights, Sophie's laughter echoed in Daniel's memory, but so did Emily's broken voice, Michael's disappointment, and his mother's tears. He tried to bury them, but they lingered like shadows, reminders of bonds he had chosen to shatter. The city, which once seemed so bright and full of promise, began to feel suffocating. Daniel's apartment overlooked the bustling streets, but the noise that once excited him now only amplified his loneliness. Sophie's charm had faded, leaving behind demands and endless criticisms. Friends he thought were allies showed their true colors: jealousy, deceit, and self-interest replaced the laughter and loyalty he once knew. One rainy evening, Daniel returned home from a particularly tense meeting, only to find a stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen counter. Sophie's excuse was that money doesn't grow on trees, though she had no shortage of luxury shopping. Daniel felt the first pangs of true helplessness he had ignored for so long. He called Michael, hoping for support. "Mike, I messed up. I don't know how to fix this," Daniel admitted, his voice cracking. Michael sighed. "Dan, I've tried to reach you before. You can't just build a life on other people's mistakes or on charm and luck. Karma has a way of catching up." Daniel scoffed at first, but deep inside, unease stirred. He remembered Edward's words from years ago, "What you give will return to you." It didn't take long for the consequences to escalate. Sophie left, claiming she was done with his failures, taking with her not only his savings but also the network and connections he had foolishly depended on. Emily, once a symbol of unwavering support, refused to speak to him after discovering his betrayal. Michael drifted away, disillusioned by Daniel's arrogance. Suddenly, Daniel was alone. The apartment that had symbolized freedom now felt like a cage, each wall reflecting the choices he had made. One evening, sitting on his balcony as rain streaked the glass, Daniel finally allowed himself to reflect. "I treated people as stepping stones. I abandoned the people who truly cared. I chased illusions." For the first time, he understood, karma was not an abstract lesson, but a tangible force shaping his reality. The warmth he had ignored, the respect he had dismissed, the kindness he had withheld all returned in the form of loss, betrayal, and isolation. That night, Daniel didn't cry. He simply sat in silence, letting the magnitude of his mistake settle over him. Somewhere deep in his heart, he knew he had two choices: continue down this path of pride and emptiness, or rebuild from the ground, starting with the lessons he had so stubbornly ignored. Winter came early that year, with bitter winds cutting through the city streets. Daniel's apartment, once a symbol of ambition, had become a cold, empty cage. Bills piled up, clients ignored his calls, and the few contacts he had left turned away. Even the vibrant city seemed to mock him, every neon light a reminder of promises he had broken to his family, to his friends, to himself. Daniel wandered through the streets one evening, rain soaking his coat, and realized how far he had fallen. He tried to call Sophie, hoping to reconcile, but her number was disconnected. Emily's soft voice, filled with pain, echoed in his mind, "I thought you were different." For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of solitude. He couldn't buy back loyalty, charm his way back into trust, or escape the consequences of his choices. Every decision, every small act of pride or selfishness, had led him here. One night, in a dingy coffee shop, he overheard a conversation that chilled him to the bone. Two colleagues mocked a man who had trusted his friends, giving everything for nothing. Daniel realized they were speaking of him. He had become a cautionary tale, a living lesson of what happens when ambition blinds morality. At home, sitting in the dark, Daniel found himself clutching a letter from his mother, a simple note written months earlier, filled with love and longing. "Daniel, wherever you are, remember your roots. Life is not measured by wealth or status, but by love, respect, and the kindness you give. We wait for you to find your way back." Tears came slowly at first, then freely. He felt the sharp sting of regret, a mixture of shame and sorrow. Every argument with his mother, every neglected friendship, every betrayal of Emily, came rushing back like a relentless tide. For days, Daniel could barely eat or sleep. He wandered the city streets aimlessly, haunted by memories of what he had lost. His ambition, once a source of pride, now felt like chains. Every opportunity he had squandered, every person he had hurt, was a weight pressing him down. And yet, amid the pain, a small spark flickered, the first glimmer of self-awareness, of understanding. He began to see that the fall was not punishment alone, it was a lesson, a chance to rebuild from the ruins. Karma had shown him the consequences of his choices, but it also held the possibility of redemption, if he was willing to take it. Daniel realized that to rise again, he had to face his mistakes, apologize to those he had wronged, and reconnect with the values he had once ignored. Spring arrived slowly, carrying with it a fragile sense of renewal. Daniel, now weary but awake to his mistakes, decided he could not continue wandering blindly. He knew he needed guidance, someone who could help him navigate the wreckage of his life and understand the lessons that had brought him to this point. He returned to the small town, the one he had left behind with such ambition and impatience. The fields looked the same, the wooden house unchanged, and yet Daniel felt like a stranger in his own memories. Maria met him at the door, her eyes wary but soft, her heart cautious. "Daniel," she said quietly, "you're home." Edward, seated in his old chair by the fire, simply nodded. "I was waiting," he said. No scolding, no disappointment, just presence, the kind that carries wisdom stronger than words. Daniel spent the first days quietly, listening. He watched his grandfather's routine, the way Edward treated neighbors, how he helped without expecting anything in return, how he lived fully in the present. Slowly, Daniel began to understand the deeper lessons he had missed. Life was not about ambition alone, it was about balance, respect, patience, and the bonds we nurture along the way. One afternoon, Edward took Daniel to the edge of the field where he had played as a child. "Do you see those trees, Daniel?" Edward asked. They grew slowly, year after year. Each storm, each drought, each winter made them stronger. People are no different. Your fall was the storm. It hurt, but it can make you stronger, if you let it. Daniel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. For the first time, he began to reflect not only on his mistakes but on the steps he could take to make amends. He started small. He wrote letters to Emily and Michael, apologizing sincerely. He offered help to neighbors and friends he had ignored. Each act, small though it seemed, gave him a glimpse of the power of kindness and the strength of rebuilding trust. One evening, Daniel spoke to Edward. "I've hurt so many people, will they ever forgive me?" Edward smiled gently. "Forgiveness is a gift. You cannot force it, but you can show that you have changed. Actions matter more than words. Live well, and the world will respond." Daniel realized that wisdom was not something to be gained through lectures or ambition, it was earned through reflection, humility, and consistent effort. And slowly, he began to feel a sense of peace he had never known in the bustling city or among fleeting pleasures. For the first time in years, Daniel felt that life was not just a race or a series of achievements. It was a journey of learning, of understanding the value of human connection, and of living with integrity. Summer brought warmth, but Daniel felt an even warmer change within himself. No longer consumed by pride or ambition alone, he focused on repairing what he had broken. Rebuilding bridges was harder than he expected. Apologies alone could not erase months of neglect, betrayal, and hurt. He started with Emily. A handwritten letter arrived at her apartment. "Emily, I was wrong. I betrayed your trust and allowed ambition to blind me to what truly matters. I cannot undo the past, but I hope one day you can see that I am trying to change. I miss the honesty and care we shared." Weeks passed without a reply. Daniel feared rejection, but he continued to work on himself, volunteering at local shelters, helping neighbors with chores, and reconnecting with old friends who had long given up on him. Then came a reply from Emily. Simple. Honest. "Daniel, your words matter, but actions matter more. Show me, and everyone else, through how you live." Michael was next. Daniel drove to his childhood friend's apartment, carrying nothing but humility. "Mike. I screwed up," Daniel admitted. "I left you behind. I let ambition blind me. I'm trying to make it right." Michael studied him, eyes guarded. "It's going to take time, Dan. But I see you're serious. That counts for something." Even Sophie, the woman whose allure had once captivated him, had moved on. Daniel realized that some bridges could never be rebuilt, and he accepted that lesson with a sober heart. Forgiveness was not guaranteed, and not everyone deserved a second chance. Back home, Daniel spent evenings with Maria and Edward, helping in the garden, cooking meals, and listening once again to the quiet wisdom of the wooden house. Slowly, he rediscovered the warmth of family, the joy of simple conversations, and the value of patience. One night, Edward looked at Daniel while they sat by the fire. "You've learned that life is a circle," he said. "Your choices matter. People remember. What you give returns. Keep walking this path, and you'll see that even broken bridges can lead to stronger connections. Daniel smiled, a weight lifting from his chest. He understood that rebuilding was not a single act, but a continuous journey and ongoing practice of integrity, respect, and care. The man who had left the town seeking only success had returned transformed. Not yet perfect, but wiser, humbler, and aware that the true measure of life lay in relationships, values, and the impact one leaves on others. Years passed, and Daniel settled into a life that was quieter but richer in meaning. The city still called to him, with its bright lights and endless ambitions, but he no longer sought validation in wealth or status. Instead, he dedicated himself to mentoring young people, sharing the lessons he had learned the hard way. One afternoon, a group of teenagers gathered in the community center where Daniel volunteered. Among them was Ethan, a bright boy with restless energy and dreams larger than his small town could contain. Daniel saw himself in Ethan, the same impatience, the same hunger for recognition. "Ethan," Daniel said one day, "I know what it's like to want everything at once. To chase success without thinking about the people who care about you. I made mistakes, many of them. But I learned that what you give returns to you. Respect your roots, your family, your friends, and yourself. That's where true success begins." Ethan listened intently, nodding, absorbing the story like a sponge. For Daniel, guiding him was not just teaching, it was healing. Each lesson he imparted reinforced his own growth, a reminder that wisdom deepens when shared. At home, Daniel continued his life with Maria and Edward. Maria, now older but just as spirited, often laughed at Daniel's attempts to emulate his grandfather's patience. Edward, though frail, watched his grandson with pride. The wooden house, once a place of simple warmth, had become a sanctuary of love, wisdom, and continuity. One evening, Daniel found himself sitting by the same field where Edward had once taught him about patience and growth. Ethan was helping him plant new trees, small saplings that would one day grow tall. "Why do we plant these, Daniel?" Ethan asked. Daniel smiled, remembering Edward's words from decades ago. "Because life is a circle, Ethan. What we plant, we nurture, and what we give returns. Someday, these trees will stand tall, just as the lessons we share will shape the lives of others." He looked at the horizon, the golden light of the setting sun painting the fields. For the first time in many years, Daniel felt a deep, steady peace. His journey, from ambition to betrayal, from isolation to wisdom, had come full circle. And now, he was part of the cycle, giving back what life had once taught him. The years rolled on, and Daniel's life had transformed in ways he could never have imagined as a restless young man. The city's bright lights no longer held him. Instead, he found fulfillment in simple joys, sharing meals with Maria, hearing Edward's quiet wisdom, guiding Ethan and other young people, and helping neighbors in need. One calm evening, Daniel sat on the porch with Edward, the sky painted in warm shades of sunset. He reflected on the journey he had traveled, the mistakes, the betrayals, the isolation, and the hard-earned lessons. "Grandfather," Daniel began, "I finally understand what you meant all those years ago. Life really is like the soil. What we plant, what we give to others, it always comes back." Edward nodded, smiling softly. "Yes, Daniel. And now you know that life is more than ambition, more than fleeting pleasures. It's about integrity, kindness, respect, and the relationships we nurture. That is the true wealth of a life well lived." Daniel thought of Emily, Michael, and even Sophie. Some bridges had been rebuilt, some remained distant, and some were never meant to return. He understood now that forgiveness, both given and received, was a gift and that each action carried consequences. He also thought of the young lives he was helping shape. Teaching them, guiding them, sharing his experiences, it was his way of continuing the cycle of wisdom. Life, he realized, was a circle of giving and receiving, a chain of lessons and growth that never truly ends. Daniel looked at the horizon, the golden fields stretching toward the setting sun. The journey had not been easy, but every heartbreak, every failure, every moment of pride and regret had led him to this place of understanding and peace. The lesson was clear, and it would remain with him forever: what goes around comes around. Life reflects the choices we make, and the love, respect, and kindness we give will always find their way back. As night fell, Daniel felt a deep contentment. He had walked the long path from youth to wisdom, from ambition to humility, from mistakes to understanding. And in that moment, surrounded by family, community, and the silent presence of Edward's guidance, he knew he was truly home, not just in place, but in life itself.